So I'm going to talk about what I've called the Bitcoin security budget and the problems surrounding this. I wrote a series of blog posts about this topic in 2018, summer of 2018, and I'm going to try to describe what I explained in those blog posts here. So first I'm going to do a little overview of some of the core technologies in Bitcoin, and then I'll talk about the actual problem. So there's really like two fundamental technologies that you need to understand Bitcoin and most cryptocurrencies. It's actually pretty simple. Aside from all of Bitcoin's obviously built on other technologies, operating systems, the internet, etc. But there's these two cryptographic primitives that are important. So there's hash functions and digital signatures. Hash functions are very simple. There's a variety of them, but what they do is you have some input data and you put it through the hash function and you get typically a fixed length hash. So with SHA-256, for example, which is a hash function, you input any data of any length. It can be anything, right? Because whether it's audio or video or whatever, you put it into a binary form and you can put it through the hash function and you get a fixed length, 256-bit in this case, output. And there's some important properties of hash functions. They produce it's like a effectively random output. So if I have some piece of data, it'll produce this like random looking hash. But if I put that same data through, again, it'll always produce the exact same hash. So it's like a fingerprint in that it looks sort of random, but it's tied to the input data. And it's also very hard to, given some hash that you want, it's very hard to find the input data that would produce that hash. And for a good hash function, there's no way to do it. You have to just try. So if I wanted a certain hash I have that's whatever, starts with 15 zeros or has whatever pattern you want, to find the input for that, you just have to try lots of different inputs. Okay. Then we have digital signatures. So the way digital signatures work, and this is a widely used cryptographic tool. You generate a public and private key pair. You generate them together. You use some fancy math to generate them. And they have this property where I can take my private key, which is obviously private, and I can take any piece of data, anything at all, and I can use my private key with that data to produce a signature. And the signature can be checked by anybody. So anyone can look at the signature, the input data, and my public key and verify that the signature produced was for that data, that exact data, and that the signature was produced by someone who has the private key, which is associated with the public key. So it effectively allows you to digitally sign things and let people check, because you can say, here's my public key, you can check that I signed it. Okay, so some of this is a bit of a simplification or abstraction, but I think it's totally fine. Like Bitcoin has UTXOs, which is a bit different than this model, but it effectively doesn't make any difference for this discussion. So we have the notion of accounts, and accounts have a public key and a private key, which is just this kind of thing. And if I want to do a transaction in one of these systems, I can produce my transaction data, which says, here's my account. I want to send X amount of the currency to this other account, right? Here's my account. I'm going to send 0.1 to this one. And then I'll sign this message with my private key. So I produce a signature. I'll broadcast this entire package of data. And then anyone, anywhere, can verify this. So they'll look at the message and the signature, and they can be sure that this public key, which is this public key, created the signature with access to the private key. So that's how you create a transaction to send Bitcoin or whatever, ETH or whatever it is. Okay, so then we have the way that these transactions are actually ordered and become part of the history. Like, how is it actually processed? Because if I've just created this transaction, like I can create it on my computer, I just create it and I'll broadcast it out, but no one knows about it yet, right? And it's not part of like the official history. So this is why it takes some time to process a transaction. So of course, this is the blockchain part. These transactions are organized into blocks. Here's an example. You got a bunch of transactions, and so there's a couple things to note about the blocks. The blocks have, so this block, for example, has the hash of the previous block. So miners in constructing this have taken the hash of this entire block here, all of the data in it, and they actually take the hash of the block header, but again, doesn't matter. They take the hash of all of the data here, and they put it into the data for this block. So now that hash is like embedded in this block here. And the reason this is important or necessary, and also this is where the blockchain part comes from, this is how they're chained together, is if any data in here were changed, anything at all, it would change the hash. Because like if you change one bit in this entire set of data, it's going to hash to a different number. And what would happen then is this block now has different data because the hash is in there and the hash is different. So what that means is when you have this chained hash thing going on, is if you go back like a million blocks or whatever, if you change one bit, any data, it'll hash different, the next one will hash different, the next one. So that change will propagate all the way through, and like you can't hide it. You can't hide the change because the hash will be different. And the other thing about this hash is it's not just any random hash. These blocks, as they're being constructed, they're mined. So miners are doing a lot of work to make this hash special. They're constantly trying to find a hash with a sufficient number of leading zeros. So the hash is like it's going to look like this, right? And that's very hard to do because, again, with the hash functions, you can't just figure out what you need to put into the hash function to produce 12 leading zeros in this example. You have to just try lots of different stuff. And to find a hash with 12 leading zeros, it's going to take you like a lot of tries, like millions of tries. And obviously in the case of Bitcoin, it's not just 12 leading zeros, it's a lot, right? So, okay, so one more thing about constructing the block, and then I'll talk more about the hash stuff. So when you're constructing a block, you're putting whatever transactions you want in there, and you can put them in any order either. What you do is you have this mempool. The mempool is just a whole bunch of transactions that are floating around that the nodes communicate with each other. You'll generally have this kind of sorted from high fee to low fee. And then when I'm mining a block, I'll take as many high fee ones, I'll take the highest fee transactions and put them in the block. Because if I win the block, I get all the fees, right? So that's what you do. As a miner, you take a bunch of transactions, you put them in the block, and you put the hash from the previous block in here, and there's some other data too, but it doesn't matter. And all of that takes a very short amount of time. That's very easy to do. It's not computationally intensive. But what miners are spending all their time doing is this nonce thing. So this nonce is this random number right here that, the nonce isn't used for anything. The nonce can be any number, it doesn't matter. All that's required is that the nonce, that this entire block, when you hash this data, including the nonce, it needs to hash to a result that has sufficient leading zeros. Or to put it another way, a number that's low enough, right? And so this is really hard to do because, again, with a hash function, you just get random outputs. So the only way to do this is to try what you do is you try a nonce, you hash it, you see if it has a bunch of leading zeros. Probably doesn't. So you change the nonce, you randomly just choose a random number, and you compute it again, and you just do that over and over and over again until you find one that has a whole bunch of leading zeros. And to get an idea of why this is difficult, so this hash I've written here is in hex, because I have 2 and A, F. So But we could easily convert this to binary where it's just zeros and ones. It would be, 16 times longer. And so suppose we have a binary target, a binary hash. Now, if you're trying to figure out how hard it's going to be to find a binary hash with, say, like, 5 leading zeros, what you can imagine is you have this hash space, right? And this is like the entire, all of the possible hash values that you could ever have are in this space. So it's SHA-256 we're talking about. So the number of values in this space is going to be 2 to the power of 256, because there's 2 options for each bit, and there's 256 bits. So if you wanted to find a hash with just just 1 0 at the start, well, that's going to be half of the total hashes, right? Because half of them start with 0, half of them start with 1, because they have to, because what else would they start with, right? So if you said, I just want to find a hash that starts with 1 0, then that'd be like a 50-50, because half of your values here, say these ones all start with 1, so you have to get one of these. And when you're doing the hashes, it's like, when you're computing hashes, it's like random, like you're essentially like hitting random little spots in the space, right? So with 1 0, you're cutting off half the space. And then if you decide you want 2 zeros, so now the first one has to be 0, so you cut off half. Out of the remaining space, these all begin with 1 0. But if I want the next bit to be 0 as well, I'm going to cut off half of that, because half of them will have the 0 and half will have the 1 for that position. So each time I'm requiring another 0, I'd be, with a binary hash, I'd be cutting this in half. So it'd be like 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros, 4 zeros, 5 zeros. So everything in this space would be a valid hash that would satisfy the 5 zeros that we want. So obviously this space is smaller than, like, it's whatever. It's like 1/16 of the entire space here, or 1/32, whatever the math is. So when you're computing random hashes, there's going to be like a 1 in 16 chance, or 1 in 32, that you hit a valid hash, right? And obviously in the case of Bitcoin, the difficulty is like this, by the way, the number of zeros is the difficulty. So if you require like 12 zeros in this case, or like 50 or whatever, it's going to be way harder. And the space that's going to have your valid hashes in it is going to be tiny, right? So that's why it takes so long for the miners, or that's why the miners have to work so hard, and that's what they're doing. They're just trying to find the nonce that will produce the hash that has enough leading zeros. And as the amount of computing power in the Bitcoin network goes up and down, we change the number of leading zeros that are required, because the system wants to always take 10 minutes to find a block. Like that's a set thing. So adding more computational power to the network doesn't make it faster. It doesn't make blocks come in faster. It doesn't allow you to do more transactions per second. All it does is, well, it adds more security. I'll describe that in a minute, but all it does is you end up with more zeros. So your hashes, they have more zeros, and that adds security. So the way the difficulty algorithm kind of works, I've just drawn it out here. If the blocks are taking more than 10 minutes, for example, if a bunch of computational power leaves the network, which happens sometimes, then they're still going to need to find, like, let's just say it's 12 zeros and that's hard. They're still going to need to find the 12 zeros, but now they have less computers checking these random nonces. So it's going to take longer for them to find a hit because the space is super small, right? So then this time, the block time will creep upward, and the algorithm or the protocol has it built in that every 2016 blocks, which is about 2 weeks, it will recalibrate. So it'll look back and see what the block times were, how many, like if they were on average more than 10 minutes, then what it'll do is it'll reduce the number of zeros that are needed. So it would go from 12 to like whatever, 10 or 8 or something. And that would make it easier for the miners to find the valid hash. And so then it would reduce the block time. So then it would go down again. And if inversely, right, if a bunch of new computational power joins the network, they can find these hashes way faster, right? So then block times would be like 8 minutes on average, and the difficulty would crank up and just require like 15 zeros or whatever it is. And okay, so that is what the proof of work mining is doing. That's really all that is going on, is these miners are just trying to find, like there's no magic that's going on really. The miners are trying to find the nonce that hashes to a hash with enough leading zeros. And like I said, this nonce is not special, it's not used for anything. This entire scheme, also by the way, this scheme is not, like this is not needed for producing Bitcoins. Sometimes you hear people say like, Bitcoin mining is doing this like complex mathematical operation to like generate these Bitcoins. I mean, it's kind of misleading, right? Because this hashing stuff is really not that complicated. They're just running these hashes. And the actual part of this process where the Bitcoins are created is simply here as a miner. Let's say I'm mining this block and I find the right nonce, a nonce that produces a hash that's sufficiently low enough, has enough zeros. Well, I will have in my block, probably before I even start mining, I'll put a transaction in there that just gives me 6.25 Bitcoin or whatever the block reward is at the time. So I just create this transaction out of nowhere, and that's where the Bitcoins come from. If I win the block, this block becomes canonical, probably. And that transaction that just said, give me out of thin air 6.25 Bitcoin becomes valid. And now the Bitcoin are there. Like so the creation of the Bitcoin was just this one transaction that took like a nanosecond for my computer to generate. The vast majority of the rest is just computing these hashes, right? Try different nonce, compute the hash. Okay, so the whole reason that this needs to happen is like, it gets a kind of complicated. Like I would suggest reading the Bitcoin white paper, but you're trying to create this like decentralized, it's like a decentralized lottery where you don't want the same miner to be able to propose the same block or a block like 10 blocks in a row, because then they can start to do stuff that you don't want. So you need this like, a lottery kind of, or that's kind of the thinking behind it. But with a lottery, like it's hard with computers to verify identity or to like have some notion of identity that can't be faked. So this is the Sybil problem. And this scheme that Satoshi came up with is a solution to like this Sybil issue. We said instead of trying to like figure out an identity and like distribute block proposals across those people, you could just have, essentially it's like he described it as like one CPU per vote, or one like CPU cycle. So rather than have the lottery go by like identity, like a bunch of miners put in like their identity and we just randomly choose one, we just say, anyone can just compute these hashes, and the first one who finds the valid nonce that produces the hash, their block goes in. So it's this way, and since this process is random, like you can have a distributed group of people doing this process, and without any like coordination or top-down control, you can like essentially produce this randomized lottery effect. It's like a randomized lottery, except it's weighted by computational power, right? The one CPU, one vote. And yeah, so this Sybil resistant, decentralized, CPU power weighted lottery produces a system where no entity can easily produce a bunch of blocks in a row, so it distributes that out randomly. And it also produces a skin in the game thing where I have to like invest a lot of money. If I want to have a lot of votes, I need a lot of hash power. So I'm investing money. So like if I wanted to like produce most of the blocks, I need a lot of hash power. So it costs me a lot of money. And like if I'm one, that makes it expensive to attack the system. And it kind of, the theory is it sort of aligns, I'm more likely to just use that money to just legitimately participate in the system. Because I'll probably make more money if I just mine and participate in the system honestly. Okay, so I should describe the fork choice rule. So the way this works is like, if you're a node in the network and you're just listening for these blocks, right? You hear about a block, and let's say this is like the latest one. You hear about these two blocks, and you have to have some way of deciding which one is the correct one, or which one you're going to like mine off of, especially if you're a miner. And the way this generally works is this is a fork choice rule. And the way it works is the heaviest fork is the one that the protocol favors, right? So heaviest means it has the most hash power on it. So you always go with the blocks that have the most hash power, which is the ones that have these hashes that have a lot of leading zeros. And of course the difficulty changes over time. So some of these blocks will have like fewer leading zeros, some will have more. And what you do is the fork that's considered canonical, that's like the correct chain, is the one that has the most hash power on it, that miners have spent the most computational work on. That's the one that's considered canonical. That's like the correct one. Yeah, I should say one other thing too about this that I think I forgot is this method of having these hashes, it's like a decentralized way for me to verify, or it's like a way to prevent cheating. So like if I were to make some change in one of these blocks, it's going to change the hash, right? Like if I take this block here, if I change any data in here, the hash of this block, which is here, is going to change. And the result, like if I make some change, the hash is probably not going to have like the 30 random zeros or whatever that's required. It's probably just going to look like a random number. So if I wanted to successfully like forge a block, I need to make my change, then find a new nonce that produces the hash that everyone knows needs to have 30 zeros or whatever, which is going to take an insane amount of computational power. So it's really, really hard to make any forgeries in here, which is, so that's kind of why this fork choice rule, it like focuses the hash power of the network onto, it like keeps the hash power of the network onto like one fork, right? So when you have like a huge amount of hash power working on this specific fork, the difficulty will be very high. So then the hashes will have tons of leading zeros, which makes it really hard for anyone to forge anything in here, right? Like at any time, I could go back and mine off of some old block, and like according to the protocol, the difficulty would be whatever it was at the time. So it might still take me some time to find valid blocks. But eventually the difficulty would go down because I only have like my one computer, right? So then I could get to the point where I can just mine a bunch of blocks, and you know, I could have hundreds of blocks here. But the network is not going to care about that because most of the hash power was on this other fork. And And so the other thing too is if this fork choice rule, sometimes it's called the longest. Sometimes you hear people say it's the longest fork. I think in the white paper it says it goes with the longest fork, but if you look in the code, like it is more about how much work is on it, but they're kind of related, right? Because if I'm, say I'm right here and I want to mine off this block, the difficulty is going to be like whatever it is, like 50 leading zeros. A lot of computational power was being used to produce that. So if I start mining off there, it's going to take me a long time to find hash that has like the 50 zeros, right? And then after 2016 blocks or less, it will recompute and it'll be a lot easier. But that process of getting those first however many, that's going to take me a long time. So that my fork there is going to grow slowly. So this fork is going to be much shorter. And obviously the same is true if I started off like the latest block. If I start a little fork here and I start mining just with my computer, that fork will grow really slowly. So this one that all of the network is focused on is going to grow much faster, or it'll grow at about 10 minutes per block. And so this fork choice rule is like heaviest, most work, but also the longest, right? And if new computational power joins the network, the blocks will be found on average a bit faster than 10 minutes, right? Like maybe 9 minutes. So that will make this legitimate chain longer. And eventually it'll go back to 10 minutes when the difficulty goes up. But in general, a chain that has less power will be shorter. Yeah, because the blocks will take longer. Okay, so the thing is, what I'm trying to describe here is the fact that the security of these proof of work systems, it depends entirely on the hash power, which like everyone knows that, I guess. But the important thing is here, like all of these schemes, like, or one of the main things this entire scheme is trying to defend against is this class of attacks called the 51% attacks, where if I'm able to get majority hash power in the network, I can start, like, say I'm an attacker, I have majority hash power, and like we're here. So this is like the end of the chain. I can start mining off of this block, and I can keep it a secret too. I don't have to broadcast my blocks, but I can start mining off here, and because I have at least as much hash power as the rest of the network, I'll be able to produce blocks, or I should say I have more, like I need to have a little bit more hash power than the rest of the network. I can produce blocks faster that have more work on them, and I could like mine for like a day and produce a bunch of blocks and then broadcast them all. So then my fork would replace whatever the rest of the network was doing. So there's all kinds of attacks and like nefarious things you can do if you have majority hash power. Like you can double spend because you can make a transaction and like buy some like goods, right? And then you go back in time and you just erase that transaction, right? Because you were like mining this whole separate chain and you just hit it, and your transaction for the thing you purchased was on the other chain, and then you just like nuke all that history. You can also mine empty blocks. So you could do your fork here and just have a bunch of blocks with no transactions in them. And there's nothing in the protocol that says you can't do that. And there's no real defense against it, except that it's hard to get majority hash power because there's a lot of computers spending a lot of money mining, right? So that's the defense of proof of work, is it's not that you can't revert transactions. It's simply that to do that, you have to have a ton of hash power, and that costs a lot of money, right? And so, okay, so then you have to think about where does this money come from, right? And how does that all work? So the way it works, of course, is you have the block rewards and the fees. This is the entire income of the miners. I'm excluding MEV, just because it complicates things a bit and it doesn't really affect any of this that much, I don't think. But you have the block reward and the fees, right? Block reward is about 90% of the miner income for Bitcoin right now, and fees is about 10%. The fees are highly volatile though, because obviously Bitcoin fees change a lot depending on whether it's a bull run or whatever it is, right? The block reward is fixed. Okay, so Bitcoin block reward follows this issuance schedule where it started at 50. So every block used to produce 50 Bitcoin to the miner who won the block. It gets cut in half every 4 years approximately. And we're now down to 6.25, okay? It gets cut in half every 4 years, right? So this block reward is declining over time. The fees are whatever, they're like constant, or they go up and down, whatever they do. But this is the income for the miners, okay? And this income is essentially split across all the miners, like over time, pro rata based on their hash power. So if you have half the hash power, on average, you're gonna win half of these blocks, and you're gonna get half of this income, right? But even if you're a tiny miner and you're entering in there and you're mining, like over time, you should get whatever proportion of the total hash power you are contributing, you should get about that much of the rewards. So this is the total revenue that's going to the miners, okay? It's a certain amount of money. Because mining is a competitive and open market where any entrant can come in and sell their computational power, there's this constant competition where, like, suppose the total miner income is like $10 million. Just say it's 10 million per day with the fees plus the block reward. Miners are going to continually enter that market and continually add hash power until they're spending close to 10 million per day. Obviously, they want to retain some profit margin, so they'll be spending less than 10 million. But since it's a free and open market, they would continue adding these new machines, new hardware, until let's say until they're spending like 9 million, which is a decent margin. So if the miner revenue, which is the 10 million, is it's setting the ceiling, the upper limit, on how much the miners will spend collectively mining, right? So let's say the revenue is 10 million, they'll spend 9 million, okay? Now, because it's this competitive market and they're trying to get the most hash power they can per dollar, they're going to be spending that 9 million efficiently, like as efficiently as they can. So they'll be getting the most hash power, hashes per second, that you can for $9 million at that present time, given the technology and whatever. So what that means is that as an attacker, if you want to 51% the network, you can expect to spend at most $9 million per day, because you have to, they're spending $9 million per day. They're getting a certain amount of hash power. You should be able to get that much hash power for $9 million a day too. There's some complications there, of course. The hardware isn't necessarily readily available, or that readily available. But over time, you should be able to enter the market, the mining market, and obtain your 51% hash power if you have enough money, right? So the reason that's important is the security of any proof of work system comes from making the attacks expensive, right? 51% attack, you need a lot of hash power. Hash power costs money, so you have to spend a lot to do the attack. And again, the amount you're going to have to spend is set by the total miner revenue. If the total miner revenue is 10 million, they're not going to be spending 50 million mining, because that wouldn't make any sense, right? They're not making any money. So the attack cost is therefore set by the total miner revenue, right? If that revenue is really high, miners spend a lot of money mining. They're doing it efficiently. They're getting the most hashes they can per dollar because it's competitive. So therefore, you're just going to have to spend a lot of money too. You're going to have to spend as high potentially as the total revenue. Probably less though, because as you enter, miners would drop out. If you were adding a bunch of hash power, some would start to lose money and they would drop out, and the total amount being spent should always stay under the revenue, right? But that's the key thing, is the miner revenue is determining how much miners are spending mining, and it's determining how much it's going to cost anyone to attack the network. So therefore, this miner revenue is like basically directly determining the attack cost. So this miner revenue, that's why I called it the security budget, this is like, the more you're paying here, the more security you get. And if this amount you're paying to the miners starts to decrease, the security of your system decreases, right? Like miners aren't going to mine for free. So if the miner revenue decreases, the miner spend will decrease, the hash power will decrease. And I should note, you shouldn't even think about like the absolute hash power. It's not purely about hash power. Like if you look at some of the Bitcoin charts, you'll see hash power is always going up. And some people will say like, oh, if hash power keeps going up, the system is more secure. And that's not strictly true. Like if miners are spending like $10 million per day, for example, just fixed over time, forever, the hash power will still go up because the hardware gets better, right? New ASICs come out and they produce more hashes per dollar. So per dollar of electricity, per dollar of hardware. So it's not strictly about like the hash power itself. It's all about the amount the miners are spending, right? So anyway, the problem here with Bitcoin is this 90% right now of the miner revenue is the block reward, and the block reward is getting cut in half every 4 years. So miner revenue is just declining on this negative exponential, and that makes the security of the system very uncertain, because like we don't know how much we need. Like if there's some motivated attacker like a nation state and they want to attack Bitcoin, like how much per day, what would be the barrier for them? How much per day would they need to, or how much per day would they be willing to spend? And what would be sufficiently high amount daily spend that would deter that kind of attacker? We don't know. But this block reward thing is basically set in stone. It's decreasing, and yeah, so the security of the system is quite unknown. So the fees are the remaining thing that people believe will hopefully provide adequate security, adequate funding to the miners. But again, we don't know, because we don't know what amount is actually needed. And the other thing with fees is they're super volatile. Like in BTC terms, they're like super volatile because it's boom and bust kind of thing. And then in USD terms, it's even more volatile because the amount of Bitcoins being paid changes, but then the price per Bitcoin changes obviously too. And yeah, the fees are just super uncertain. So this entire philosophy is like people have said this before, it's fixed issuance and variable security, which I think is a good way to put it. This issuance is very well defined and established, which has its benefits. It's nice to know the total supply that will ever be produced. But the downside here is you're saying we're going to have this super rigid supply schedule, but the security, like, we're just kind of going to hope it's going to be okay. And that's, to me, pretty obviously a very bad design for your system, because the security of the system has to take precedence over the monetary, like, soundness or whatever. Because if the security breaks, then it doesn't matter if there was, you know, this meme of 21 million coins. If the security breaks, the whole thing's done, right? So the approach being taken by other projects like Ethereum is more of a variable issuance, fixed security. So the issuance is not being promised and set in stone. It's able to vary, and the community can decide to turn it up or down and produce as much security as they need, which is the right approach, because, you know, if you start coming under attack, or like there's some motivated attacker out there and you need more security, you can just increase these variables, produce more incentive to the miners, and you get your higher security, where this adherence to this fixed supply thing is very dangerous. Right, so when I wrote these posts, I spoke with a lot of people in the Bitcoin community and tried to understand, like, what is the plan here? Because there was some recognition that this is a problem, but the solutions that I heard, I thought were, like, incredibly bad, which is actually what motivated me really to write the article. So the solutions that I heard were like, well, the one solution is to remove the hard cap, like print more than 21 million Bitcoin. But that's going to be a really hard sell, obviously. The 21 million hard cap is like a fundamental aspect of Bitcoin. So that one's very tough. And even if you do remove the hard cap, then you're just endlessly funding, you're just endlessly printing more money to fund the mining, which seems not great, maybe unsustainable. The predominant solution I heard was to just let the fees take care of it. And this just seems like it's possible that could work, but it just seems like bad design, right? Because you just don't know what the fees are going to be. And we know right now the fees are pretty small compared to the block reward. So we'd be cutting relative security by like a factor of 10 if we're just relying on block rewards. And again, or maybe I didn't say this, but you don't have to wait until the year 2100 whatever, where issuance is block rewards actually zero, for this to be a problem, because each time we hit a halving, it's a problem. We're going from 6.25 right now to 3.125 in 2024. That's a big reduction, right? That's half of this. Half that's gone. So just relying on the fees seems like it's just a bad idea. Proof of stake, to me, this is the best solution. This is not something that the Bitcoin project is pursuing, as far as I'm aware. There's many, many benefits to proof of stake, and it doesn't do any of this mining. Like, it's like 10,000 times more efficient, and you actually get higher security per dollar spent. But that's not on the roadmap at all for Bitcoin, as far as I know. One solution I heard was charitable mining, where people just mine because it's like the good of whatever, the good of the world. And I think that's just a laughably terrible idea, right? You can't count on that. You can't count on people just being charitable and spending their money mining. And again, like, the mining you have to be spending a lot of money, especially if a system like this is going to be mainstream, securing like hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions, tens of trillions. You need this to be a lot of money. It needs to cost an attacker like, whatever, a lot. Tens of millions per day, 100 million, whatever the number is. It can't just be like, a few million per year, because then any attacker can derail the entire thing with a few million per year, right? So anyway, I'll just close with this. Like, one of the main fundamental things that I think is often missed in crypto is these projects should be divided into a product and like an engine, right? So the product that Bitcoin provides is this. It's a ledger. It's a simple ledger, or you could say it's digital gold, it's digital cash, it's a fixed supply digital money. So it's like the simple ledger. It's like a spreadsheet. This is the product that this entire system like produces and gives to the users, right? So the engine, what I call the engine, is just like all of this mechanism. Proof of work, the nodes, the client software, the hash functions, like all of that stuff, like no one cares. Users don't care about any of that. All of this is a means to an end to produce the product, a functioning product, right? The product is the thing that matters. And what I see happening in the Bitcoin community is people are really attached to part of the engine, which is like, we have to stick to proof of work. We have to stick to proof of work. But users don't care about proof of work. And if there's a better way that you can produce your product, which is the only thing people care about, using like a different engine or some different parts in your engine, then you should do that, because the product is what matters. So with Ethereum, this is why I think Ethereum is more powerful and will succeed, is so Ethereum, the product, is a complete Turing-complete computer. It's not a computer that you're going to run video games on, but it's Turing-complete, so it's a completely general system. You can have any arbitrary computation that you want to do, you can do on here, including a ledger. So this entire product that the Bitcoin system is producing, you can have that on the Ethereum system, right? And of course, there's a million different tokens, which essentially, like any ERC20 is essentially replicating the entire functionality of Bitcoin. Just you would want to set like the final supply to be 21 million, and that's pretty much it. But it's providing this product with an engine that is, when it moves to proof of stake, will be like fundamentally more efficient, fundamentally more sustainable, won't have this security budget problem, won't have the fixed issuance variable security. So yeah, so like I said, I think this is a major problem. I wrote about it 3 years ago now. I've still not heard any good solutions. I think the only way forward is to move to proof of stake, which Ethereum is doing, and everything that Bitcoin does can be replicated on Ethereum using a better engine, and then we won't have to worry about this countdown to a potential catastrophic event.